My wolf has never once in 19 years had the decency to whisper. That night the hall was full, 100 of us at the long tables, the summer crews in from the grass, the smell of hot bread and horse on everybody, the doors thrown open because the long grass gives back its heat until midnight and takes its time about it. I was listening to Audie Bram tell me the water in the east cisterns had gone green again. And into the middle of that, into a hall so loud a man could not hear his own name, my wolf said, plain as a bell in an empty room. She has good hands. I did not look up. 19 years of practice went into not looking up. The new one, the hey hand. Look at her hands, boy. Understand, a wolf's voice belongs to the man it lives in. That is the oldest law of the bond, older than Sorrowmark, older than the round pin, older than the picket lines that run out of our gates into the grass. Every wolf-blooded man and woman in that hall carried a voice behind their ribs, and every one of those voices was theirs alone. Not a soul in Sorrowmark had ever heard my wolf but me. So he had spent 19 years saying whatever he liked, at whatever volume pleased him, and I had spent 19 years pretending my ears were my own. Good hands, he said again, satisfied and settled. I made the mistake of following his attention. Down at the far end of the hall, past the trestles, a woman was crossing to the door with an empty water yoke over her shoulders. Some are higher. She'd come in with the grass crews 3 days before, one of the dozen the stewards take on for cutting, and I could not have told you her name. She had stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the aisle with the yoke across her, and her ears had gone red, not blushing red, not a girl caught looking at a king, but scalded red, the red of somebody who has just been shouted at in a quiet church. She stared at the floor. Then she went out the door fast enough that the buckets swung. Said my wolf. That was all. That was the whole of it. I ate my supper and heard about the cisterns and went up to my rooms, and if you had told me then that the summer would end with a man's own wolf lying down in the round-pin dust and refusing to walk for him in front of 600 people, I would have laughed and offered you my chair. Her name was Rena. Audie told me the next morning, in the tone Audie uses for everything, which is the tone of a woman who has buried 2 husbands and outlived both their opinions. Rena, no family name given, and don't ask her for one. She goes quiet and polite and you feel like you've kicked a dog. Audie shifted her weight against the fence rail. She came up the Picket Fall Road on foot, 2 weeks on foot by her boots. Her satchel's cut clean through on the strap side, and she carries it in her arms like a baby so nobody sees. I hired her anyway. Why? Because she asked for the worst work I had and didn't blink when I gave it to her. Audie spat into the dust. And because she talks to the horses like they're paying attention, and they are. Out in the near pasture, the crews were dropping the second cut, moving through it in a long, slow line. I found her without meaning to. She was mid-line, working steady, and she was the only one not talking. Go and say something to her, said my wolf. I did not. Coward. I went to see about the cisterns. Here is the thing about being alpha king of a horse hold, which nobody tells you when they put the ring on your hand. The work is enormous and none of it is grand. Sorrelmark sits where the long grass breaks against the Sorrel Hills, and it exists because of 2 things: the grass and the great round pin at the center of the hold, a walled ring of packed earth wide enough to hold 400 head. We breed horses, wolves that breed horses. Half the kingdoms east of the Reach think that's a joke, and half the kingdoms east of the Reach buy their cavalry from us. The other thing nobody tells you is that a king inherits his uncle's ledgers and his uncle's name. My uncle was Alder Vosk, and 9 years before that summer, Alder Vosk took the spring herd down the Ravenswing cut in whether he should not have moved them in, and the picket line let go, and 11 horses and my uncle went into the ravine. That is the sentence. That is how it is said. 9 years of it, in whether he should not have moved them in. The Reach Council wrote it in their record in a clerk's tidy hand. Misjudgment of the alpha, the hold to be held blameless. Held blameless, as if we had asked. I was 22. They put the ring on me at the graveside because there was nobody else, and I have run sorrow mark for 9 years underneath a sentence in a ledger that says the last good man to hold it was a fool. I never argued it. What was there to argue? I wasn't there. Hesper Dane was there, warden of the picket, my uncle's own man, who came up out of that ravine with a broken arm and a rope burn across both palms, and told the council in a shaking voice exactly what he had seen. I have never once in 9 years thought Hesper Dane a liar. Hold that. It matters later. So, the summer, the second cut, the green cisterns, and my wolf's new hobby. Her hands, he said, 3 days on while I was inspecting a girth strap. I want to see them again. Stop it. Make me. I could not make him. Nobody can. A wolf is not a pet and not a passenger. He is the half of you that never learned to be polite. Mine had spent 19 years telling me the truth at the worst possible moment. He told me my first betrothal was a mistake in the middle of the betrothal supper. He told me I was afraid, out loud, on the lip of the Ravenswing cut with my uncle's body on a horse blanket. He is not cruel. He simply has no idea that a thing can be true and still not need saying. And beginning that week, he had exactly one subject. She sings to the 2-year-olds, he reported, while I was signing grain writs, under her breath. Nobody's told her she's doing it. She gave her bread to the yellow bitch with the bad leg, twice. She's frightened of the road, boy, not of us, of the road. That last one I turned over for a while. Then came the colt. We called him 9, because he was the 9th foal of a mare who had given us 8 beauties and 1 catastrophe. He was 3 years old, 17 hands of black temper, and he had put 2 men in the infirmary and 1 out of the trade entirely. That morning he had broken the near gate and was going around the round pen in a fury with a torn hobble flapping at his hock, and 40 people were on the rails watching 6 of my best hands fail to get near him. I was climbing the rail to try it myself, which is the sort of decision kings make when they are being watched, when Rena Hale went through the gate on foot. She did not walk toward him. She walked to the middle of the pen, sat down in the dust with her back mostly to him, and started coiling a rope she had no use for. Adi said, "Oh hell." 9 came around the wall twice more. Then he stopped. Then he came at her, not the charge, the other thing, the ugly stiff-legged travel of a horse deciding, and 30 feet out he checked, because she had begun, quietly, to sing. I have heard singers. We have a hall and a hold and money, and I have sat through a great many people singing at me. This was not that. It was low and unbeautiful, 3 notes and a 4th she kept sliding away from, the sound a woman makes when she is not aware that she is making it. It went out over the packed dirt of my round pen, and the colt lowered his head to the height of her shoulder and stood there breathing on her hair, and the rail went so quiet I could hear the flies. She reached up without looking and slipped the hobble free. And my wolf said, into the middle of that silence, in the enormous, unembarrassed voice of a creature that has never once been laughed at, "Oh, there she is." That is when it happened to me. I want to be honest about it because the songs have it wrong and the songs have had it wrong for 1,000 years. There was no mark. Nothing burned, nothing flared, nothing sang. What happened was this. I was standing on the rail with my hand on the post, and the ground under my life changed direction. Anyone who has ridden knows it. You are going one way. The horse, without breaking stride, without so much as a twitch you could name, decides to go another, and half a second before he does it, you feel the whole world shift its weight beneath you and you understand that you are no longer the one deciding. That, exactly that, in my chest, in my hands, in the soles of my boots, on my own fence, in my own hold. I gripped the post and I thought no. And down in the middle of the round pen, sitting in the dust with her hand on a killer's neck, Rena Hale turned her head and looked directly at me. Not at the colt, not at the rail, at me, and her ears had gone that scalded red again. I got down off the fence, and I went and looked at the cisterns. "Boy," said my wolf, delighted, following me the whole way. "Boy, boy," she heard me. She heard the colt breathe. She heard me. That is not possible, and you know it is not possible. And if you say it again, I will." "You will what?" he said. "Stop feeding us." I gave the cisterns 4 hours they did not need. I have thought since about what a decent man would have done next. A decent man would have gone to her that evening, said, "I believe something strange is happening," and let her answer or not answer as she chose. What I did instead was avoid her for 11 days, which is difficult in a hold of 600 people, and impossible when your wolf has appointed himself the hold's crier. He announced things. "In the grain barn with 4 stewards present, she's thinner than she was, look at her wrists." At the mid-month judgments from the dais with a dispute over a stud fee going on in front of me, she's standing at the back. She always stands at the back. Why does she always stand at the back, boy? At supper, every supper, ask her. Ask her. Ask her something. Ask her about the road. And every single time, somewhere in the room, a woman with a water yoke or a hay fork or a bowl in her hands would go very still, and then very carefully continue with what she was doing, and her ears would burn. Nobody else saw it. Why would they? Adi once told me the king goes about the hold with a face like a closed barn door, and if I went stiller than usual at supper, that was the king thinking about cisterns. On the 11th day my wolf said, in a tone I had not heard from him since I was 22 and standing at a graveside, "She is going to run, boy. She's mended the strap on that satchel." I went out to the hay barn at dusk. She was sitting in the open loft door with her legs hanging into the dark, eating an apple, and the satchel was on her back. Mended. New waxed cord through the cut. Rena. She did not startle. That should have told me. Nobody in Sorrelmark fails to startle when the Alpha King speaks behind them in the dark, and she had known I was there for some while. "My lord." "Roan," I said, "I've never been any good at the other." "My lord Roan," she said gravely, and I discovered that I was standing in my own barn being gently made fun of by a hay hand, and that I did not mind it in the least. "Tell her," my wolf said, "tell her she has good hands. Tell her the colt would have killed anyone else. Tell her that when she sat down in the dust you—" "Would you," I said, "be quiet?" And Rena Hale, sitting in the loft door with an apple halfway to her mouth, said, "He won't. He never does." The barn was very large and very quiet, and full of the smell of new hay. I said carefully, "Say that again." She had gone white. Not red, white, the whole way, the way people go when the thing they have been carefully not doing for 11 days has just done itself. She set the apple down beside her on the boards with enormous concentration, as though the apple might be the part that could still be saved. "I'll go tonight," she said. "I'll go now. Adi's owed nothing. I've worked the days I was paid for and 2 more. I never told anybody. I have never in my life told anybody." "Rena." "It's not a thing I do." Her voice had gone thin and fast. "It's not I don't listen on purpose. It's like you're in a room and someone shouts. Do you hear the shout on purpose? He's loud, my lord, he is so loud." "I am not," said my wolf, wounded. "He says he isn't," she said, before she could stop herself, and then put both hands over her face. I sat down on a hay bale 8 feet from her, because my legs had made the decision without me. "How long?" I said. "Always," through her hands. "I thought everybody did. I was 6 years old before I understood other people only hear their own." She lowered her hands. "My mother's people were listeners. Hall listeners on the reach. 4 or 5 generations back they'd sit at the judgments, and a man's wolf would speak, and the listener would say what it said, and that was the end of the argument because—" She stopped. "Because a wolf cannot lie," I said. "Because a wolf cannot lie," she agreed, "and men found that inconvenient and the listeners stopped being born or stopped saying so." She looked out into the dark. "My mother told me, keep your teeth shut, Rena, and never let a lord know." "And you walked into an Alpha King's hall." "I walked 2 weeks up the Picket Fall Road," she said, "and Sorrelmark was the first door that opened." I let that sit. "Whose voice were you running from?" She said nothing at all. She's shaking, my wolf said, softly for once. Boy, look at her hands. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. She saw me look and she heard him say it, and something in her face broke open, not into tears, into a kind of terrible, tired laughter, one breath of it. 11 days, she said, of him telling you to talk to me. Do you know what that is like? Sitting in a hall listening to a man's wolf be brave for him. I did not consent to any of it. You are welcome, said my wolf. He says. I know what he says. I stood up. Rena, listen. Nobody in this hold will ever hear a word of this from me. Take the barn loft or take the road tonight or in 10 years. You are hired summer help and you are free as air. But before you decide, a warden's coming up from picket fall in the morning with a writ, and Adi tells me he's asking after a girl. She had gone very still. Hesper Dane, I said, warden of the picket, do you know the name? And Rena Hale, whose ears had burned for 11 days and who had not once flinched at a killing horse, put her back against the door frame of my hay barn and slid slowly down it until she was sitting on the boards. I know his wolf, she said. Hesper came at noon with 4 riders and a paper. I have known him since I was a boy. He is a square, gray, courteous man who has been warden of the picket for 22 years, who taught me to splice rope, who wept at my uncle's grave and did not care who saw. His arm sets crooked in cold weather from the ravine. He has never asked me for anything. He got down in the yard and clasped my hand in both of his, and behind him his wolf, I could not hear it, of course. No man hears another's, walked at his heel with its head low. Roan, then remembering, my lord. Hesper, I'll be an hour and gone. He was already pulling the writ from his coat, apologetic. Council business and stupid business at that. A girl's run from picket fall. Took money from the warden's chest, my chest, and I'd sooner have given it her, and there's a warrant sworn, and I have to be seen to ride out and wave a paper about. He grimaced. 22 years and they have me chasing a thief across 3 holds because the council likes its ledgers tidy. 600 people were in the yard, and every one of them heard him say it, and every one of them turned to look at the girl standing at the back with a hayfork in her hands. Adi moved first. Adi got in front of her, which is a thing I will not forget while I live. Hesper's face did something complicated. Ah, he said. Ah, hell. Boy, said my wolf. Rena Hale, Hesper said, and there was nothing in his voice but weariness. Girl, I've ridden 2 days. Come and stand up here and let's have it done. I'll speak for you at the council. I've said so a dozen times and I'll say it again in writing. It's 40 crowns and a cut strap and nobody wants you. And Rena, behind Adi Bram, said, he is saying, if she opens her mouth here we are finished. The yard went silent, not quiet. Silent, 600 people, and I could hear the windmill turning. Hesper Dane stood in the middle of my yard with a piece of paper in his hand, and looked at a hay hand, as though she had reached into his chest. What, he said. Your wolf. She stepped out from behind Adi. She was white to the lips and her voice did not shake at all. He's saying it again. He's been saying it since you came through the gate, warden, he says. Boy, said my wolf very quietly, and I understood then that in 19 years I had never once heard him afraid. Boy, that lean brindle knows she can hear him. Look at it. Look at what it's doing. Hesper's wolf had lain down in the dust of my yard. Not in submission, not to me. It had lain down flat with its chin on its paws in the manner of a creature that has been carrying something up a long hill for 9 years and has just been told it may put the thing down. And Hesper Dane began slowly to shake. Roan, he said, he had gone the color of tallow. Roan, don't. Whatever she's a thief, boy, she's a thief with a story, don't you? Warden, I said, and I heard my own voice come out level and strange and very far away. You have never once in your life called me boy. Behind him, his riders were looking at each other. Say it. Adi said to Rena, Adi who had buried 2 husbands, say what it says, girl. And Rena Hale, in the yard at Sorrowmark, in the flat noon light, with her hands open at her sides, said the thing that took 9 years off my back and put them somewhere else entirely. It says the picket line did not let go. Hesper made a sound. It says the line was cut, and it says he cut it, and it says he has been carrying it every day since, and it says— Her voice cracked for the first time, and she went on anyway. It says he never meant the Alpha to be on the line. Nobody moved. It says he only meant to lose the horses, Rena said. For the Ravenswing lease. For money. And Alder Vosk went down after them because Alder Vosk always went down after them, and the wolf says he has known that for 9 years and could not say it because a wolf can only speak to its own man, and its own man would not listen. She stopped. She was crying now, and she did not seem to know it. It says, tell him, tell him, tell him. It has been saying it since he came through the gate. I looked at Hesper Dane, who taught me to splice rope. He was not looking at me. He was looking down at his wolf in the dust, at the lean, brindle animal with its chin on its paws, and his crooked arm was hanging useless at his side, and his face was the face of a man in a room whose door has finally, after 9 years, been opened from the outside. Get her out of my sight, he whispered. His riders were already backing their horses. No, I said. No, said my wolf, and for once, for the first time in 19 years, he and I said the same word in the same breath, and I did not mind at all who heard which of us. The roundpen, I said. Tomorrow first light. Every soul in this hold on the rails, and the council's clerk fetched from Ravenswing overnight, and the writ read out in full, and every wolf in Sorrowmark inside that ring. I turned. Rena. She looked up at me with her ruined face. Will you stand in the middle of it, I said, and say what they say? And my wolf, who has never once in 19 years had the decency to whisper, said it out loud into a silent yard, in front of 600 people, exactly 1 heartbeat before I could stop him. Say yes, please say yes. He'll never ask you for anything again. She heard it. She was the only one in the world who heard it. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, and she looked at me for a long moment across the dust of my own yard, and what she said was, "Tell him I heard that, nobody slept." I sat up in the tack room with Oddie Bram and a lamp, and the writ between us on the bench, and we went at it like 2 people trying to shoe a horse that keeps lying down. She says a thing, Oddie said. 600 people hear her say it, and every one of them goes home and asks himself the same question, my lord, and you know what it is. How do we know she isn't inventing it? How do we know she isn't inventing it? Oddie turned the writ around with 1 finger. A wolf can't lie, grand. A girl can. That's what the council's clerk will write down, and he'll be right to. There's no man alive can check her. That's the whole of what a listener is, the only person in the room who knows. She isn't inventing it, said my wolf. He says she isn't inventing it. He would. Oddie was not impressed. She has never been impressed. Roan, listen to me and don't be a king about it for 1 minute. That paper says thief. It's sworn, it's stamped, it came out of picket fall with the warden's own seal on it. Tomorrow morning you'll put a girl in the middle of your round pen to call the warden of the picket a murderer, and the first thing any clerk in the Reach does is look at what's written about the witness. I looked at the lamp. Then we make it something anyone can check, I said. Oddie waited. 3 of ours, I said. Volunteers, wolf-blooded, chosen by them and not by me. Each one thinks of a thing his wolf knows and no living soul does. Something that can be proved after, a place, a buried thing, a debt. She stands in the ring and says it out loud. If she's guessing, she'll guess wrong 3 times in front of 600 people, and I'll ride her to picket fall myself and hand her over. Oddie's mouth moved. It took me a moment to recognize it as a smile, because I had not seen one on her since the yard. And if she's right 3 times, she said, then when she stands up and says the picket line was cut, then a man's got to decide whether she's a liar for the 4th. Audie got up and shook out her skirts. At the door she stopped. "The warden taught you rope," she said. "Are you going to be able to do this?" "No," I said. "He's going to do it anyway," said my wolf comfortably. "He says I'll do it anyway." "Well," said Audie, "he's the sensible one," and went out. I found Rena in the hay loft at 3 in the morning, sitting exactly where she had been sitting the night I found out, with the satchel in her lap. "You should sleep." "So should you." She did not turn around. "He's been reciting Audie's tackroom plan to you for an hour. I can hear him from here." I stopped where I was. "How far," I said, "does it carry?" "Down the hall and out the door and across the yard." She said it flatly, the way you'd give a horse's height. "Yours does. Most don't. Most are a room, maybe a stable. Yours goes over the wall, my Lord Roan. I have spent 11 days learning the shape of this hold by which corners I can't get away from you in." "I have never been so flattered in my life," said my wolf. "He says—" "I know." She put her head back against the door frame. "Please stop telling me what he says. It's the strangest courtesy anyone's ever done me." I sat down on the boards, which is not a thing alpha kings do, and which my knees informed me of at length. "Tell me about the 40 crowns." For a while there was only the sound of the barn, the enormous patient sound of a building full of dried grass. "I was 3 years at Picket Fall," she said. "Kitchen, then the lamps, then the warden's stair. It's a good post, he's a good man." She heard herself and made a small sound. "That's the my lord, that's what nobody's going to believe tomorrow. He is a good man. He gave me the lamp post because a scullery girl's hands were cracking in winter. He asked after my mother. In 3 years I never once saw him unkind." "And his wolf?" Wolf never stopped. Her voice went very careful. "Not once in 3 years. Every hour I was on that stair. Tell him, tell the boy about the line, over and over like a man knocking on a door in the night. And the warden would sit at his desk with his crooked arm and write out the picket accounts and never look up." She turned her head. "Do you know what it is, hearing something beg for 9 years? I didn't know what it was begging for. I only knew the word line and the word boy. And I thought boy meant a child. It meant me. I know that now." "When did he learn what you were?" "Midwinter," she said. "The council's clerk came up to sign the lease renewals, and one of his riders had a wolf that would not stop laughing about a horse he'd sold twice, and I laughed too, out loud, in the middle of a corridor with 3 men in it and nobody having said one word." She looked at her hands. "The warden was on the stair behind me. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything for 2 days. Boy," said my wolf low. "He called me into the office and shut the door and put 40 crowns on the desk," Rena said, "and he cried. He wasn't threatening me. That's the thing I can't make anybody understand. He put the money in front of me and he cried and he said, 'Girl, go somewhere they've never heard of the Raven Swing and be happy and I'll never come looking.' And I took it. I took it because I was frightened and because it was the only kindness in the room and because I thought," her voice went. She waited for it. "I thought he was giving me something. And I was 2 days on the road before I understood he'd bought a thief." I sat very still. "The warrant was sworn before you left." "The morning after," she said. "The clerk copied it out on the same stair I lit. 40 crowns from the warden's chest and my name in it and taken by night." She lifted the satchel and set it in the space between us on the boards, and she opened it, and she tipped it, and there they were, 40 crowns of Picket Fall silver, unspent, dulled with 2 weeks of road, some of them still stuck together the way coins are when nobody has ever separated them. "I cut the strap myself," she said, "the first night, so it'd hang under my coat where a man on the road couldn't see it and I couldn't spend it. I've been hungry with 40 crowns on my chest since the 6th day." "Look at her," my wolf said. "Boy, look what he did to her. Say something, say the right thing." "I had no right thing. I have never in my life had the right thing. So I did what a man does in a horse hold at 3 in the morning, which is the only thing I know how to do at all. I took off my coat, which was a good coat, and I put it over the coins, and I said, 'He isn't a good man, Rena. He is a kind man who did one thing and then spent 9 years being kind at it. Those aren't the same, and tomorrow the whole hold is going to learn the difference, and it will be the worst morning of my life." She looked at the code. "He'll break," she said quietly. "You know that. When his own wolf answers, he'll break in front of all of them." "Yes." "And you don't want it." "No," I said. "I want my uncle's name." "And her," said my wolf, at a volume that would have carried across the wall and out over the long grass. "He wants you too. He's wanted you since the colt. He grabbed the fence like a drowning." "Get out," I said. Rena Hale put her face down on her knees and her shoulders shook, and after a moment I understood, with an enormous and unfamiliar relief, that she was laughing. "They came in at first light, all of them. Sorrelmark holds 611 souls, and I do not think 11 of them were absent. They stood 4 deep on the rails of the round pen and sat along the top of the wall and hung out of the hay barn doors, and the crews from the far pastures had ridden in through the dark to be there. And there were wolves, 30, 40, more, drifting in along the wall, sitting where their people sat, because when the hold gathers, the hold gathers. Ravenswing's clerk had come overnight on a fast horse and was still in his riding coat. His name was Vane. He was young and cold, and had the handwriting of a man who has never once been wrong in ink, and he set his board on his knees and looked at me with open dislike. "My lord, this is irregular." "It is. A hold has no jurisdiction over a council warden." "None," I agreed. "So I am not trying him. I'm going to prove a witness. What the council does after is the council's affair, and you'll write down every word of it, and I'd take it as a courtesy if you'd write down that I said so." Hesper Dane stood in the center of the round pen with his 4 riders, and did not look at anybody. His wolf sat beside him. It had not lain down again. It sat lean and brindle and upright in the packed dust with its ears forward, and it watched the gate. Rena came through the gate. She had washed her face and put on her own clothes, and she carried nothing, and she stopped 10 paces inside and stood there while 600 people looked at her. I have seen men break at that. I have broken at it, at 22, with a ring on my hand. "Steady," said my wolf to me, or to her, or to himself. "Warden Dane," I said, "there is a writ." Clerk read it. Vane read it. It took very little time. A thief, 40 crowns, taken by night, sworn by Hesper Dane, warden of the picket, on the 4th of the winter month. The word thief went around the rails and came back. "Warden," I said, "do you stand by it?" Hesper's head came up. "I do," he said, and his voice was steady and grieving, and it was the voice of a man who has decided, on a long ride, exactly how this is going to go. "Roan, my lord. She's a poor girl with a trick. She watches faces, she guesses. They've done it in Market Square since the reach was grass. I'll not have her hanged for 40 crowns. I'll take her back and I'll speak for her, and she'll be let go, and I will sleep the better for it. But I will not stand here and let a horse hold call me." His voice cracked. "Call me what she means to call me." It was very well done. It was so well done that a low sound of sympathy went along the rails. "He believes half of it," my wolf said. "That's the terrible part, boy. He's believed half of it for 9 years. "Then it costs you nothing to let her prove she's no guesser," I said. 3 of ours, not chosen by me, Oddie." Oddie Bram walked out into the ring with 3 people who had drawn lots in the dark. A farrier named Sull, a girl of 19 off the hay crew called Merritt, an old Corb who had been a picket man under my uncle and could not now walk without a stick. "Each of you," I said, "think of a thing your wolf knows and no living soul does. Something that can be dug up or opened or asked after. Say nothing." Sull the farrier went red to the throat and stared at the sky. Merritt went white. Corb leaned on his stick and smiled at the dirt like a man remembering a very old joke. Rena stood in front of Sull. She closed her eyes. It took longer than anybody wanted. And then she said, in a clear, flat, apologetic voice, There is a bay mare's shoe under the third flag of your own hearth, and you put it there the night your father died, and you have never told your wife, because you told your father you'd have it melted. Saul sat down. He simply sat down in the dust of the round pen, and his hands went over his mouth, and his wolf stood up beside him and pushed its head under his arm. The rails made a noise I have never heard in my life. She stood in front of Marit. The girl was shaking. "You have your mother's letters," Rena said. "You cannot read them. You've been carrying them to Ravenswing every quarter day to find a clerk who'll do it and turning back at the bridge because you're ashamed." Marit put both hands over her face. Rena stood in front of Old Corb, and Old Corb grinned at her with 4 teeth, and Rena listened, and something moved across her face, not shock, a kind of soft dismay. "He says," she said, "you're to tell them where the good gray is buried because you've been asking him for 11 years and he's been telling you every day, and you've never once heard him. He says it's the low bend past the north cistern where the willow root came up. He says—" She stopped. "Go on, girl," said Corb. "He says he is sorry he cannot make you hear him," Rena said, "and that he has been very lonely." The old man's face came apart. "And on the rails of my round pen, 600 people who had come to watch a thief be shamed sat in the dusk gold light of a summer morning and began, quietly, to weep, not for the girl, not for me, but for every animal that had spent a lifetime shouting into a shut room." Vane the clerk had stopped writing. "Warden," I said. Hesper Dane had not moved. He stood in the middle of the ring with his hands at his sides, and his crooked arm was trembling, and his lean brindle wolf had risen and taken 3 steps toward Rena Hale and stopped, quivering all over, the way a dog stands when it hears a voice it has waited 9 years at a door for. "Roan," he whispered, "don't ask it, I'm begging you, don't ask it in front of them." "Ask it," said my wolf. "I have a question," I said, "and I'm not going to ask you." I walked out to the middle of my round pen, where the ground is packed hard by 400 years of hooves, and I stood in front of the wolf of the man who taught me to splice rope, and I got down on one knee in the dust so that we were eye to eye, and behind me a hold of 600 stopped breathing. "Old friend," I said, "what happened on the Ravenswing cut?" The wolf answered, "I heard nothing. I will never hear it. That is the law, and I have made my peace with the law. What I saw was an animal put its head up and speak, at length, urgently, its ears working, its whole lean body leaning into the words, and what I heard was Rena Hale's voice 10 paces behind me, going raw, saying it after him like a woman reading a letter aloud to a room. He says, I cut it. He says, I cut the picket line at the 4th stake in the dark, and I hid the knife in my boot, and I did it for the Ravenswing lease and 40 crowns a year, and I would have the money still. He says." Hesper made a sound like a man going into cold water. "He says, I only meant the horses to go. I swear before every moon there ever was I only meant the horses to go. He says, and Alder went down after them, because Alder always went down after them, and I stood on the lip with the rope in my hands, and I did not throw it for 4 heartbeats because I was working out what it would cost me if he lived." Somebody on the rails cried out. "He says, and then I threw it. I did throw it. And I went down after him, and I broke my arm on the second ledge, and I burned my hands to the bone on that rope, and I could not find him. I could not find him in the water. I looked until they pulled me out." Rena's voice broke and went on. "He says, and every man in the Reach called me a hero for it, and I have not slept a whole night since." Hesper Dane went down on his knees. "He says, tell him, tell him, tell him." She was weeping openly now, and she did not stop, and she did not look away. "He says, I have been saying it since the day it happened. I have said it to you every day for 9 years, in every room, on every road, and you would not hear me, and I could not make you, and I could not tell anyone else. Because there is no one else in the world I am allowed to speak to." The wolf turned then from me and walked away across the ring. It walked to Hesper's horse standing tied at the rail, and it took the strap of the saddle roll in its teeth. and it pulled twice, 3 times, worrying at it like a pup with a rag while 600 people watched, until the roll came loose and fell open in the dust. 9 feet of picket line fell out of it. Old, weathered, black with age and stiff as a bone, coiled and recoiled 1,000 times by a man's hands, and at one end, plain as a word in a book, cut clean and square by a good knife, not frayed, not parted, not worn through by weather or weight or a young alpha's misjudgment. Good. The wolf picked it up in its mouth and carried it to me and laid it at my feet, and then it went back and lay down against Hesper Dane, who was kneeling in the dust of my round pen with his hands over his face, and it put its chin on his knee. That is what nobody who tells this story ever gets right. It did not turn on him. It did not shame him. It had spent 9 years howling the truth at a man who would not hear it, and the moment the truth was out, it went and lay against the only person it had ever loved and would not leave him. I picked up the rope. I stood in the middle of my own round pen with 9 feet of my uncle's picket line in my hands, and I looked up at the rails, at 600 faces, at the crews and the stewards and the children on the wall, at old Corb standing straight for once and Ottie Bram with her jaw set, and Sull the farrier still sitting in the dirt. 9 years. Say it, said my wolf very gently. Say it out loud, boy. You've had it in your teeth since you were 22. Alder Vosk, I said, and my voice did not do what I told it to, and I let it, did not misjudge the weather. The sound that went up off the rails of the round pen was not a cheer. I have thought about it for a long time, and I do not have a word for it. It was the noise a hold makes when something enormous that has been sitting on it stands up and walks off. Vane the clerk was writing. He was writing so fast his board shook. He had gone the color of paper, and he did not stop writing for a long while, and when he did, he looked up at me, and I saw that his cold, clever face had come off entirely, and there was a young man underneath it. My lord, he said, I will carry this to the council myself. Today I'll not send it. He swallowed. The record will be amended. Your uncle's name, he stopped. It will be done properly. Thank you. And the warden will be taken to Ravenswing under guard, and there will be a trial, and I do not think, he stopped again. He looked at the man kneeling in the dust with a wolf against his knee. I do not think it will be long. Hesper's riders had not moved. 2 of them were crying. I went and stood over Hesper Dane, and I did not know, and do not know now, what I felt. You gave her 40 crowns, I said. He nodded without uncovering his face. You gave her 40 crowns and swore her a thief so that, if she ever said it, no one would believe her. He nodded again. You taught me rope, I said, and my voice went, and I let it go, and I stood in front of 600 people with tears running down my face and did not care in the slightest. You taught me a long splice on the barn floor when I was 7 years old. You wept at his grave. I wept at his grave, Hesper said into his hands. Yes, I said, I believe you did. I turned away, because there was nothing else in the world to do, and I saw Rena Hale standing where she had stood the whole time, 10 paces off, with her arms wrapped around herself, having said aloud in front of an entire hold the private, howling, 9-year misery of a man she had liked. And Vane the clerk, gathering his board, said the thing that neither of us had thought of. He said it kindly. That is what I hold against him, even now. He said it as a courtesy, in the ordinary voice of a young man doing his work well, with his pen already moving. Your full name, mistress, for the record, and forgive me, the nature of the gift, as precisely as you can give it. The council will want to know exactly what you can do. Rena Hale looked at him. Then she looked at me, across the dust of the round pen, over the head of a wolf that could not lie, in front of 600 witnesses and a clerk with a pen, and I watched every particle of color go out of her face. Boy, said my wolf, and there was no laughter in him at all. Boy, what have we done to her? I withdraw the question, Vane said. He said it fast. To his credit, And I have thought about Vane the clerk more often than I expected to. He said it before anyone else in that ring had understood there was a question to withdraw. You cannot, I said. He looked up at me, and his pen was still in his hand, and I watched a young man discover the shape of his own life's work in the space of a breath. No, he agreed quietly. My lord, I cannot. It's said in front of 600. It's said in front of 4 picket-fall riders and a council clerk. It will be in the Reach by the 5th day and in the council chamber by the 8th, and there is no ink in the world that unwrites it. He set the pen down on his board very carefully as though it had bitten him. I am sorry. I have never in my life been sorry about a record before. Rena had not moved. She stood in the middle of my round pen with her arms crossed over her chest and looked at nothing at all, and I have seen exactly that stillness once before, on a 2-year-old filly in a squeeze chute. In the moment she stops fighting and begins to work out where the walls are. Get her out of the ring, said my wolf. Auntie. Auntie was already moving. She got an arm around Rena's shoulders and turned her not gently, the way you turn a person, but firmly the way you turn stock, which is the only way Auntie Bram has ever comforted anybody, and walked her out through the gate and into the crowd, and the crowd opened for her and closed behind her, and I saw hands go out and touch her shoulder and her sleeve as she passed. Sull the farrier, still sitting in the dirt. Marrot with her ruined face. Old Corb, who had waited 11 years to learn where his gray was buried, taking off his hat. They did not know what they had heard yet. They only knew what it had cost her. Then it was Hesper. The riders took him. They were his own men, and they had ridden 2 days with him, and one of them, a big soft-faced boy named Kell, could not make his hands do it and had to be spoken to twice. In the end, Hesper stood up on his own and held out his wrists and said, Kell, son, just get it done, in the same patient voice he had once used on a 7-year-old who could not make a splice hold, and the boy did it weeping. His wolf walked at his heel. They brought him past me. He stopped without being told and looked at me, and his face was not the face of a man who had been broken. That is a thing I have never been able to make anybody understand about that morning. He had been carrying a stone up a hill for 9 years. He had put the stone down. He looked lighter, and it was the most terrible thing I have ever seen on a human face. They'll want her, he said. I know. Roan, listen to me. 9 years I've sat at that table. I've watched the council spend a whole afternoon on a bridge toll, and I've watched them break a hold in 4 minutes. His voice was low and fast and level. He was giving me a report, the last one, the way he had given my uncle reports on the picket lines for 20 years. A witness who can hear any wolf in any room. Think what that is. Not to a judge, to a treasurer. Every lease, every levy, every marriage contract in the Reach, and no man in any of those rooms ever able to keep his own counsel again. He's right, said my wolf. They'll not chain her, Hesper said. They'll be kind. They'll give her a house and a stipend and a title, listener to the council, and a bed she cannot leave, and in 20 years she'll be the most valuable object in the Reach, and she will not once have been asked whether she wanted it. His mouth twisted. Kindness is how it's done, boy. I should know. I bought her with kindness. It cost me 40 crowns, and it worked for 2 weeks. I could not speak. Don't do what I did, Hesper Dane said. Don't wrap a thing you love in a warrant to keep it quiet. And then, because there was nothing left in him at all, he said, tell her no, don't tell her anything from me. I've no right to send her a word. He looked down at his wolf, walking against his knee. He wants to say something to her. He can say it in front of everyone, I said. That's what she does, Hesper. She lets them be heard. The warden of the picket stood in the gate of my round pen with his hands bound and closed his eyes, and his lean brindle wolf lifted its head and spoke. And Rena Hale, standing 40 feet away in the arms of my stable mistress, went very still and listened, and put her hand over her mouth. She never told me what it said. I asked her, years later in a bad winter in a warm room when I thought I had earned it. She said it said thank you. She said that's all it said. It said thank you, and then it went with him. and I never asked her again. The hold did not go back to work. You cannot ask 600 people to cut hay on the afternoon. They have learned that a wolf can be heard. They stood about in the yard in knots and could not settle, and by evening the thing had begun to move through Sorrowmark the way a fever moves through a barn. I saw a man of 50 sitting on the cistern wall with his arms around his own wolf's neck, saying, out loud, over and over, I never knew, I never knew, I never knew. And I saw two of the hay crew standing 6 feet apart, not looking at each other, each waiting to see whether the girl would come by and say aloud the thing they had spent all summer not saying. And I saw the children of the hold following Rena Hale at a distance of 20 feet, in complete silence, the way children follow weather. She could not eat. She went up to the loft. At dark, Audie Bram came and found me in the tack room, where I had been standing for 2 hours with a picket line in my hands, and she took it out of my hands and hung it on a nail, which is what you do with rope. Council's clerk is gone, she said. Fast horse. He was decent about it, came and told me himself so I could tell you, and he said to tell you the amendment goes on the record first and the other business after, and he'd take as long over the second as he could without being noticed. She snorted. Boy's got a spine after all. He'll be eaten for it. How long? 8 days to the council, 6 for them to argue. A rider back inside a fortnight with something with a seal on it. Audie sat down. Roan, what are you going to do? I don't know. That's not an answer a hold can eat. Then here's one. I sat down across from her, and I found that my hands were perfectly steady and my voice was not. We sell 400 head a year to the Reach. Cavalry, remounts, the whole eastern levy. That's the hold, that's your wage, and Sull's forge and Corb's roof and the grain we don't grow. If a council rider comes to that gate with a lawful summons for a woman who is nothing to us but summer hire, and I stand in the gate and say no. They stop buying horses. They stop buying horses, and then they levy us for obstruction, and then, in about 3 years, some other alpha king rides up the Picketfall Road to take a hold that can't pay. I looked at the rope on its nail. That is what a horse hold is, Audie. It's a business that lives inside somebody else's kingdom. Audie Bram folded her arms. Alder would have said no, she said. Alder is dead in a ravine because he went down after 11 horses that weren't worth it. The words came out of me before I knew they were in me. They came out flat and hard, and I heard them go across the tack room and hit the wall, and I sat there in the lamplight, appalled, in front of the only person alive who had loved him longer than I had. Audie did not flinch. Yes, she said, he did. And this morning 600 people found out he wasn't a fool for it, and they've been walking about all day like men who have had a stone taken off them, and every single one of them is thinking the same thing, my lord, and you'd know it if you come out of this room. They're thinking, our alpha went down after them. She stood up. That's the hold. That's what you inherited, not the grass and not the round pin, that. She went to the door. Audie. She stopped. If I say no in the gate, I said, and it goes the way I've said, do you know what it costs you? I've buried 2 husbands, said Audie Bram, and I know exactly what everything costs, and I have never once found the cheap thing worth having. She opened the door on the warm dark. Go and talk to her yourself, not him. You. She's had 19 years of your wolf saying it for you and about 4 honest sentences out of your own mouth, and one of them was about cisterns. I went up to the loft. She was sitting in the door with her legs in the dark, and the satchel was beside her, and it was open, and the 40 crowns of Picketfall silver lay in it in the moonlight. Don't, she said, before I had said anything. Don't what? Don't ask me to stay. Her voice was very level. You're going to. He's been rehearsing it all the way up the ladder. He's very bad at it, my lord. You should hear him. And I would like, once in my life, to have somebody stop before they say it. I sat down on the boards. I wasn't going to ask you to stay. No. I was going to tell you what a fortnight from now looks like, I said, and then let you do whatever you want with it. including take a horse out of my stable tonight and never send it back." She turned her head. So I told her. All of it, the way Hesper had given it to me and the way Adi had given it to me. The amendment and the record, the 8 days and the 6, the house and the stipend and the title, the bed she could not leave, the gate and the summons, and what happens to a hold that sells horses and then stops. I did not soften it and I did not shape it. I have never been able to make a thing sound better than it is. It is the one honest gift I have. When I finished, she was quiet for a long while. "And if I run tonight," she said, "then you run tonight, and I'll say I don't know where you went, and it'll be true, and I'll make sure it stays true." I looked out at the long grass, silver to the horizon. There's a horse in the 3rd stall that's fast and stupid and nobody would look for. There's a road north out of the Sorrel Hills that isn't on the council's maps because it isn't anybody's road. It's just where the drovers go. It comes out at Kettle Rack in 9 days. Nobody there has ever heard of the Raven Swing. I made myself say the rest of it. You'd be safe, probably for good. You'd be alone for the rest of your life, because the whole of it would depend on nobody ever knowing what you are, and I know what that costs, because I have watched you do it for 11 days and it made you thin." "Boy," my wolf said. "Not now. Boy, tell her the other thing." "There isn't another thing." "There is," he said, and he sounded, for the first time in 19 years, like something enormous and old and out of patience. "And if you will not tell her, I will, because I have been telling her for 11 days and she has never once heard it from you." Rena Hale sat with the moon on her face and listened to my wolf and me argue. And then she began, helplessly, to laugh, the same laugh as the first night, cracked and exhausted, one breath of it, and it undid me completely. "Say it then," she said. "One of you, I don't care which anymore." So I said it badly. "There's a third thing," I said. "It isn't running and it isn't the council. It's this. I stand in the gate." She stopped laughing. "They take our trade," I said. "They levy us. It gets very hard and it stays hard, and the hay crews go and the forge closes and Sull's boy goes to Ravenswing for work. And in 3 years or 5 somebody stronger rides up that road and takes Sorrelmark, and I fight him, and I probably lose, and my uncle's name is on the record clean and the hold he died for is gone." I made myself look at her. "That is the honest shape of it. I'm not going to pretend to you it's a fine gesture. Adi says the hold would want it. Adi has buried 2 husbands and thinks everybody is as brave as she is. And you." "I don't want to do it," I said. "I want to be told there's a way that costs nothing. I have been standing in a tack room for 2 hours waiting for one, and there isn't one, and I am not a good enough man to have made my mind up yet." The wind came up off the grass, a mile of it moving at once, the great slow breathing sound of the long grass in late summer. "Why would you do it at all?" she said. "You've known me 11 days. And there it was, sitting in the loft door of my own hay barn, 31 years old, Alpha King of Sorrelmark, with the words behind my teeth where they have lived my entire life, and my mouth would not open, and my hands were shaking, and somewhere below us in the dark a horse shifted in its stall. "Roan," said my wolf. He had never once used my name. "Roan, let me." And I sat there in the dark, and I made a decision that I have never regretted for 1 hour of my life, and that Adi Bram calls, to this day, the single most cowardly thing she has ever seen a king do. I said yes. I did not say it out loud. I thought it, deliberately, the way you shift your weight in the saddle before the horse has understood you mean to turn, and my wolf, who has never once in 19 years had the decency to whisper, drew himself up in the middle of my chest and said it, at a volume that would have carried across the wall and out over the long grass and halfway to Kettle Rack. "Because he has loved you since you sat down in the dust with a killing horse, and sang to it like a woman washing dishes." Rena Hale went scarlet from the collar of her shirt to the roots of her hair. "And he grabbed the fence post," my wolf bellowed joyfully, "and he thought no. and he has been lying about CISTRNS ever since. Enough, I said out loud, strangled. And he will stand in that gate whether you stay or go, and he would rather die than have you know it. And so I have told you, because one of us has to be. Enough. Silence. The barn creaked, the grass breathed. 40 crowns of picket fall silver lay in an open satchel between us, dull in the moonlight. Rena Hale looked at me with her face on fire and her eyes enormous, and for one long moment neither of us could think of a single word in any language. Then she said unsteadily, "He's not going to be quiet about this, is he?" "No," I said. "He never has been about anything. Rena, I'll send him. I can't send him anywhere. That's the whole." I stopped. I put my hands over my face. "There is no version of this where you get any peace. That's what I'm asking you to look at. Every room in this hold for the rest of your life." And Rena Hale reached over in the dark and took my wrist and pulled my hand down off my face, which nobody had done since I was a boy of 7 on a barn floor learning a splice. "My Lord Roan," she said, "I have spent my entire life in rooms full of shouting that nobody else could hear." She was crying. She was also unmistakably laughing at me. "Do you know what it is," she said, "to hear one of them once say a true thing on purpose?" Below us, in the dark of the barn, a horse shifted in its stall. 11 days remained before a rider came up the picket fall road with a seal on a paper, and I did not know then what the paper said, and neither did she, and we sat in the loft door of a hay barn on the edge of the long grass with the whole ruinous, unpurchasable rest of it in front of us. She did not say she would stay. I did not ask. The hold decided without me. That is the part I have never been able to say properly at any table since. I did not call them together. I did not stand on anything and make a speech. I have never in my life made a speech that a horse would have listened to. What happened was that, on the second morning Sull the farrier came to the tack room, turning his cap over in his hands, and said that the forge could run on half charcoal through a winter if it had to. He done it as apprentice, and that his boy could learn a splice as well at home as at Ravenswing. He went out before I could answer. He had rehearsed it. You could hear where the joins were. On the third morning old Corb came in on his stick and stood in front of me and said, "The low bend past the north cistern," and nothing else. And I did not understand until Oddie told me that afternoon that he had gone out there at dawn with 2 of the hay crew and dug, and found the gray, and reburied him properly with the old man sitting on a stump for 4 hours telling the ground about a horse. "He wanted you to know it was true," Oddie said. "He's told it to about 100 people. He says a girl who can tell a man where his gray is buried is worth more to a hold than the Reach's whole cavalry contract. And he says he was a picket man under your uncle and he'd like that entered somewhere." "There's nowhere to enter it." "There is," said Oddie, "and you're standing in it." On the 5th day, Merritt off the hay crew got her mother's letters read to her, by Rena, in the loft, with the door shut, and came down again 3 hours later with her face swollen and walked straight into the middle of the yard, and told anyone who would listen that she'd take a summons in the girl's place if they'd have her, which was not sensible, and which was the point. And by the 7th day, I understood that 600 people had worked out, entirely without my permission, that the question was not whether the hold would pay for Rena Hale. The question was only whether the king had the nerve to let them. They stopped asking me about the trade. They started asking me about the winter feed. "They're ahead of you, boy," said my wolf. "They've been ahead of you since the round pen." "I know." "Say something to them." "They don't want a speech. They want a king who doesn't look like a man being marched somewhere." "Then straighten up," he said, "and go and put a saddle on that ugly colt in front of all of them, because that is the only sort of speech you have ever been able to make." Which is how the Alpha King of Sorrowmark came to spend the 8th morning of the worst fortnight of his life in the round pen, with 17 hands of black temper trying to remove his head from his shoulders, while the entire hold sat on the rails and shouted advice, and a hay hand sat in the dust of the middle with a rope she had no use for, singing 3 notes and a fourth she kept sliding away from. I stayed on, God knows how. When I finally got down, my hands were shaking so hard I could not undo the girth, and the noise off the rails went up over the wall and out into the grass, and Nine stood with his head at Rena's shoulder, blowing, entirely uninterested in either of us. Oddie Bram in the gate watching the hold pour down off the rails. There, that's your speech. Never make another. The rider came on the 12th day. Not a council rider, Vane. He came up the Picket Fall Road on a horse that was finished, and he got down in the yard and could not stand, and 2 of the hay crew held him up while he got the pouch off his shoulder. He had ridden 8 days out and been in the council chamber 6 hours and turned around and ridden 4 days back on remounts he'd paid for himself, and he had not slept in any bed since he left us. 600 people came into that yard. "My lord," Vane said, and his voice was gone entirely. He held out the pouch. "Read the second one first." I read the first anyway, because my hands had already opened it, and it was 2 lines of a clerk's tidy copperplate, and it said, "The record of the Ravenswing loss 9th year is amended. The Alpha Alder Vosk did not misjudge. The line was cut by the hand of Hesper Dane, warden of the picket, who has confessed the same before the council without compulsion. The Alpha's name is returned to him." I stood in my own yard and could not see the paper. Oddie took it out of my hands and read it out loud in a voice like a hammer on an anvil, and the sound that came off 600 people is the second sound I have no word for, and I put my hand on the shoulder of a boy from the hay crew whose name I did not know, and he put his hand over mine, and neither of us said anything at all. Then I read the second. "Tyrone Vosk, Alpha King of Sorrowmark. The council has heard the clerk Vane's report concerning the witness Rena Hale and the nature of her gift. It is the council's finding that no summons shall issue." I read it 4 times. Reason of the finding. The witness's testimony is only of use where a wolf may be brought into a room, and it is the council's judgment that after the events at Sorrowmark no man in the Reach who has anything to hide will ever again bring his wolf into a room where this woman is. Her value is therefore in what she has already done and cannot be repeated at will. A listener in the council's own house would be attended within 1 month by an empty chamber. Further, the clerk Vane, being asked what she would be worth to the treasury, stated that she was worth nothing to it, and that any hold in the Reach could have learned the same by asking her, and that no one ever had. The warrant sworn against Rena Hale is struck. The 40 crowns are the warden's own and were given freely. She may keep them or return them as she pleases, and the council does not care which. She is nothing to us, let her be something to you. Vane the clerk, 24 years old, held upright by 2 hay hands in the dust of my yard, looked at me with the ruined face of a man who has been afraid for 12 days and said, "I lied to them, my lord, only the last part, about her being worth nothing." He swallowed. "I have never lied on a record in my life, and I do not think I will ever do it again, and I would like to say that I did it out loud in front of your hold so that it is not a thing I did in the dark." Nobody moved. "Then you'll say it again at supper," I said, "and every year at this supper, for as long as you live, and Sorrowmark will hear it and Sorrowmark will keep it, and if the council ever comes asking, 600 of us will have forgotten every word." The yard laughed. It was the first laugh in 12 days. And it went on much too long, the way laughter does when it is not really about anything. And Oddie Bram, being Oddie, said what the king had not thought to. "Where's the warden?" Vane's face closed. "He'll not hang," he said. "He asked to. They said the ravine wasn't murder, it was the line, and the line was a lease and 40 crowns a year, and there's no rope in the Reach for a man's greed, only for his hands." He looked at the ground. 20 years on the Ravenswing Road mending the picket lines he cut, under guard. He'll be 68 when it's done. A pause. He said, "Thank you." They keep saying that, said my wolf quietly, that family, man and wolf both. I gave the letter to Rena Hale. She read it standing in the yard with 600 people around her, and when she came to "She is nothing to us," she put her hand flat on the paper, on those 4 words, and stood there for a long time. "Nothing to us," she said. "Rena." "No," she looked up and she was not crying and her voice carried. "You don't understand. My mother said, never let a lord know, my whole life, every room." She lifted the paper. "It took a council of the Reach 8 days and 6 hours to work out that the only thing that makes me dangerous is a room where nobody trusts anybody." She laughed once wonderingly. "And so they have made me useless, forever, on purpose." She turned around slowly and looked at the hold. "That's the safest I have ever been in my life," she said. Audie Bram from the gate, dry as chaff. Well, you'll find sorrel marks got nothing worth hiding. Sol's shoe, Marit's letters, Corb's gray. Take the lot of it, girl. We've been shouting at each other for 400 years and never once heard a word." She stayed the winter, and she did not say she was staying, and I did not ask. She took wages. She worked the 2-year-olds. She would not sit at the high table, and I stopped trying to make her, and instead I ate at the long tables about twice a week, which the stewards thought was a great condescension, and which was in fact the plain fact that I could not bear the length of a hall between us. It was not simple, I will not pretend it. There were rooms she would not go into, and there were nights she woke, and there was a week in the deep of the winter when she saddled a horse at 4 in the morning and rode out to the low bend past the North Cistern and sat there until noon and came back and said only, "It's very loud in a hold." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I know you can't help it." And I said, "No." And once, in the spring, she said the thing I have never told anyone, which was, "The warden's wolf begged me for 3 years and I did nothing, and then it took me 11 days to say it here. Do you know why?" "Because we asked." "Because you asked," she said. "Nobody had ever asked." I never once asked her the other thing. Not that winter, nor the spring, nor the summer that came after, when the grass came up over the long grass and the second cut was down, and the hold was full of the hot bread-and-horse smell of 100 people at the long tables. I had watched a kind man wrap a woman in a warrant to keep her quiet. I had listened to him tell me, with his hands bound, how it is done. And a king with a hold and a round pen and 400 head of cavalry has more ways of keeping a thing than any warden ever had, and every one of them looks, from the inside, exactly like kindness. So I said nothing for a year, and I was not good at it, and everybody in Sorrelmark knew, including the horses. It was Audie who lost patience. "Roundpen," she said, "this evening. The 2-year-olds are through and she'll be closing the gate, and there'll be 60 people on the rails watching the sun go, and you will be one of them, and I will have Sol hold you there if I must." "Audie." "2 husbands," said Audie Bram, "and I know exactly what waiting costs, and it is the only thing I have ever bought that lost value every year I held it." So I stood on the rail of my roundpen in the last of a summer evening, with 60 of my people up on the wall and the dust hanging gold and slow in the light, and Rena Hale down in the middle of the ring with her hand on the neck of a black horse that had killed nobody in 2 years. She was singing. She did not know she was doing it. Nobody has ever told her. "Boy," said my wolf, "I know. She's 40 feet away. She can hear me from the far side of the cistern wall, and you know it." "I know." "Then say it," he said. "Say it in your own mouth like a man." And I stood on my own fence with my hand on my own post, exactly where I had stood the morning the ground under my life changed direction, and I opened my mouth, and nothing whatsoever came out of it. 19 years, 32 of them now. A man who is good with horses and bad with sentences, whose wolf has said every true thing he ever meant and said it too loud and at the wrong moment, in a hall, in a yard, in a loft, in front of everyone. I could not. So I did the only thing I have ever been able to do. I shifted my weight deliberately, The way you do it in the saddle before the horse has understood you mean to turn. And I thought it at him, clearly on purpose, the whole of it. The way a man thinks a thing he has held behind his teeth for a year and a day. And my wolf, who has never once in his life had the decency to whisper, drew himself up in the middle of my chest and threw it across the round pen at the top of his enormous, unembarrassed, entirely shameless voice. Down in the ring, 40 feet away in the gold dust, Rena Hale stopped singing. She stood very still with her hand on the black horse's neck. Then she turned around, and she looked up at the rail where I stood, and her ears had gone scarlet, and she was smiling in a way I had waited a year to see, and she put her hands on her hips. And she shouted, across the packed earth of my round pen, so that 60 people on the wall turned around to look. "Tell him louder, I want to hear him make you say it." He did. He made me say every word of it, out loud, in front of my whole hold, and I have never been so badly used by anything in my life, and Audie Bram laughed until she had to sit down on the mounting block. We were married in the round pen, because there is nowhere else in Sorrelmark that holds everybody. There was no crown in it. There is no coronation for a Luna of a horse hold. There is a supper, and too much of it, and Sull's boy playing badly on a pipe. Old Corb wept. Marit read out, in front of 600 people, in a slow, steady voice with her finger under the words, one letter of her mother's, because she had learned to read that Winter and Rena had taught her. And once a year, on the 12th day after the second cut, a clerk of the Reach called Vane rides up the Picketfall Road on a good horse and stands up at the long tables and says, out loud, that he lied once on a record, and Sorrelmark drinks his health and forgets every word. That is the whole of it. We are old now, or old enough. She still sings to the 2-year-olds and does not know it. I am still no good with sentences. But some evenings, when the hold is loud and the hall is long and she is down at the far end of it with her back to me, I stop what I am saying to whoever is saying something to me, and I put my hand flat on the table, and I shift my weight, and I think a thing at him on purpose. And 40 feet away, in a hall of 200 people, an old woman with gray in her hair goes very still over her bowl. And her ears go red. And she does not turn around. She never turns around. She only lifts her hand a little off the table, where nobody but me can see it, and moves 2 fingers again.